Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and that means Friday Reads here on BookTube. Friday Reads, weekend reading report, weekend reading update, weekly reading update, whatever day you do it. There's a particular little tradition on BookTube of giving periodic progress reports on the shape of your reading, what you have read recently, a little bit of what you've thought about it. A lot of people give a little bit of what they thought about it, and then they do a full detailed review later on. What you are currently working on, the books you're currently in the middle of, and then what you're looking forward to reading. I love these videos. I think they're fantastic. I try to do them myself. They're a little bit on the tricky side for me because in a given week I read a lot of books. This week, for instance, I read a lot. I've read a lot of books, compensating for last week, but not in a bad way. Last week, having visitors is wonderful, but it did cut down on reading time. And also a little bit difficult for me because I read, I don't even know. I would say 97% of the books that I read are one seat reading. They're one sitting. I don't do anything else. I don't go to classes. I don't go to work. I don't have any significant others. I don't have any friends. I don't have any social life. I'm not even wearing pants. So basically you give me a book. I mean, what's a good example? Yeah, this thing. You give me a book like this, I'm just going to sit down and read it. I'm not going to need to start it and then put a bookmark in it and say, "Oh, I'm working on this. It's been a while." And I fall on books avidly, like a wolf on a sheep. I fall on them avidly. I read them with abandoned energy. Even the bad ones, even the ones that I'm pretty sure are going to be bad, I still tear into them because it's just so much fun. And so that's a little bit of a problem. Then what you are going to read, well, what I am going to read is also a little bit of a problem because between now and the end of the year, I plan on reading all of the major American new releases in 15 or 16 genres that I haven't already read. That's a lot of books. So I have to condense for my Friday reads and give a snapshot. But I've done that for the last few, and you seem to enjoy them. So we're gonna keep doing that. We'll do that again today. So I will be bouncing back and forth between all sorts of things, and we'll see if any of it is of interest to you. I've got pictures here on the iPad. The first one is a reread from, I don't even know the last time I read this. I think it was probably when this cover came out. This is not the first cover that I read this book. I think this was reissued in the 90s. That was probably when I reread it. So that's a long time. And it is The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. Don't really know what prompted me to pick this up, except maybe that Asimov has come up on a couple of recent videos, especially a video, for instance, about separating the art from the artist. And this is terrific. If I remember, I'm not up on Asimov's career as I should be. And the idea of a reading project where I read everything by Asimov is really appealing, but wouldn't happen this year, of course. But I think this novel won every award that wasn't nailed down, and I liked it a lot. It's not quite as shticky. It's not quite as stooping for every private joke. It's not quite as unawardable as so much of what Asimov wrote, which he wrote it, you pick it up on the bookstand or the newsstand or whatever, you know you're going to enjoy it, but you're not going to give it an award. And so much of what he wrote is like that, so much. That I think, if I remember correctly, this won major science fiction awards, and I bet that's why, because it does a lot less of that kind of stuff, a lot less of that pulp writer kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed it. There's no character depth here at all. This takes place in the near future. A scientist who really is not the brightest bulb in the chandelier has discovered what seems to be a limitless source of free energy. But of course, you know in an Asimov story that's going to come with a high cost. It's not free. It's hurting someone. Somewhere, it's hurting someone. A theme... I don't know that I want to import such highfalutin terms as themes to Asimov's work, a lot of which was written, I would argue most of what we're seeing from Asimov is first draft work. He was a natural storyteller, that horrible woolly phrase, but it's true with him. So you don't need much more than a first draft, but nevertheless, themes is weighing it down just a bit. But if I had to, a preoccupation, a tick, if you would, for Asimov, it would be the cost of being innocent. You seem to dwell on that a lot. That your innocence always has a cost that is being racked up somewhere, whether the innocent people ever realize it or not. Very interesting worldview, if I'm right about that. But I really, really enjoyed this. It's been a long time. Been a long time since I read it. There were details of the plot that I forgot, but I really enjoyed it. And then, so that is a recent read, and it's a reread. Then we have something is close to being an ongoing read. I think I'm largely done with it, but it's taken up a lot of my time every day, carrying from room to room, annotating, thinking about it a lot. And that is the new translation by Ross Benjamin of the Diaries of Franz Kafka, which I got last year in a hardcover from Schocken Books, and then this year I got the paperback. And it's the paperback that I've been lugging all around and really sinking into this thing. It's not happy reading, and not at all. It's not happy reading, but it is utterly engrossing. Just totally engrossing. Don't know why. I don't know why I didn't see this, why I didn't have this reaction to the hardcover when I got it last year. But this is, I'm all but done with it. Now that I've written about it, I think I'm all but done with it. But it's still there on the nightstand. Then we have another reread. This is for Cimmerian September, Michael K. Vaughan's Conan event for the month of September. I reread Harry Turtledove's novel, Conan of Venarum. Naturally, Steve objects to the cover of this particular Conan pastiche novel. But this is, I want to say this is Turtledove's only Conan pastiche novel, at least published. But this is the story of an event in Conan's life when he was very, very young, a boy. He is at the siege of Venarum, so it's his first direct contact with the kingdom of Aquilonia that he will one day rule. And it's a desperate event, and Turtledove pads it out on both ends with plenty of other stuff from Conan's life, and gives us Conan as a very young boy. So very tricky, because in a lot of ways you deny not only human experience, but the interest of the character of Conan completely, if you say that at age 15 he was already completely formed as Conan that we know. That, you don't want that. I didn't want that to be true. And it's not. There's lots of room for growth here, so to speak, literally room for growth. But Turtledove does a great job here. This is a semi-canonical event in Conan's semi-canonical biographical chronology, and here it gets the novel it deserves. Really, really, really enjoyable. A little bit too slight, I think, to talk about on Cimmerian September, but you never know. I might make a video about it. Then we have, I think we already saw this on this channel. This is Jason Stanley. This is a racing history. How fascists warp the historical record. They realize they have to control the past. They have to lie about the past, but they also have to teach their lies. You have to believe their lies. And that, therefore, history becomes very important to them. This academic study becomes very important to them. And this book was great. Just great. I thought I'd read everything possible to read on this kind of subject. But not only is this book really eloquent, really sharp, but also the news. The news every day adds relevance to this thing, adds more and more nuance to the heft of this thing. The common refrain now in alt-right circles here in my country, in the United States, the common refrain in alt-right circles, everybody from well, you name it, all of the alt-right grifters, all of them, from the incarcerated ones like Steve Bannon to what's his name? Well, Dave Rubin and Tim Pool and whatnot. But there's one, the tiny little one, the 4-foot tall one that I'm forgetting. But Jordan Peterson the same way. Ben is his first name. I'm blanking on his last name, even though I've reviewed one of his books, which was contemptible. But it doesn't matter. Their individualities don't matter, because their common refrain now, it started about a month ago, is that the claim that Donald Trump claimed that there were very fine people on both sides of the Nazi Klan rally in Charlottesville has been thoroughly debunked. They're now all saying that. Ben Schwartz, is that his name? No. I'm drawing a blank on his name, and that kills me because he's famous. He's the most famous of them all. The facts don't care about your feelings guy. They are all saying that same phrase from a programming update that they got. That the claim that Trump said there are very fine people on both sides of Charlottesville has been widely debunked. Trump said that on camera. It is absolutely unambiguous, completely unambiguous. He did say that. It is not debunked. You cannot debunk reality. He did say it. It is on camera. I watched it live. I, like you, have watched a million different replays of it. It has not been debunked. They're saying it because it's very important for fascists to claim history. They have to have control over it. They have to have control over history. And this book really underscores that. It's more interesting to. It's more interesting. It has a little bit more heft to read this thing when people are doing this in the present day discussion in your own country. There's an incredibly strong fascist party in this country. It's a hair's breadth away from taking control of this country and turning the country into a fascist country. It's driving me crazy that I can't remember that little guy's last name. It's not Schwartz. It's driving me crazy. You're all yelling it at the screen right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to do this. But I simply have to stop. It's just the kind of mind that I have. I'm just going to type in facts don't care about your Ben Shapiro. Okay, there you go. All right. Okay, there you go. All right, you can stand down now. Ben Shapiro is widely regarded as the thinking man's fascist, and he is even so repeating this ridiculous thing that what Trump said on camera has been widely debunked. And that might seem absurd, but I've seen on Twitter and on Facebook, I've seen right-wing useful idiots, just the marching privates, the people who aren't thought leaders. They're instead listening. They're soaking up all the stuff from Nick Fuentes or Dave Rubin or Ben Shapiro or whatnot. I've seen them repeat that. The minute they hear that from somebody who sounds like they know what they're talking about, they just start repeating it when they heard it with their own ears. They still just start, that claim, that's been debunked. No, it hasn't. He said it on camera. And we saw that even before he said that. When Trump was running for president in 2015, he was asked, do you disavow the endorsement that you have received from David Duke, a former Klan leader and a well-known white supremacist? And Trump was in full lie mode and said, I don't know anything about David Duke. I don't know anything about white supremacists. I don't know anything about white supremacy. I don't know what the word white means. I don't know what the word supreme means. I don't know what the word supremacist means. I don't know my own name. I don't know where I am right now. I deny all reality. It's just when a dozen people who were following him in New York politics knew perfectly well that he's a friend of David Duke's. It was just... He chose that opportunity on camera to just rewrite reality. I have never heard of white supremacy. I'm a 70-year-old man, but I've never heard the term white supremacist. I don't have any idea what you're talking about. I've never even heard the name David Duke. Fascists do this all the time. The famous examples from history would be Stalin cropping people out of photos. So they're literally not there. They are gone from the record. And we see that also in popular entertainment. This is just how fascisms work, right? In the conclusion of the TV miniseries Chernobyl, the terrifying intelligence leader tells the whistleblowing scientist that we will make it virtually impossible for anyone ever to have determined that you lived at all, which is a far cry from just refuting something. And it goes towards the idea of not just erasing history, but controlling it. So this was a long digression there, including getting Ben Shapiro's last name, Ben Schwartz. Oh my God, he'll never forgive me. But it goes a long way. It's a long digression, but to recommend a book. Stanley's book is great. Then we have a book that isn't great. It's the opposite of great in every way. It is a gigantic pile of crap. It's Truth by Vivek Ramaswamy, dude. I know I say this all the time with Trump books, but there is nothing about this book that is true. Nothing. Vivek Ramaswamy is not a best-selling author. Vivek Ramaswamy did not write this book. Vivek Ramaswamy did not see the drafts of this book before it went to the press. There are no truths in this book. Every demonstrative statement in this book is provably false. This is a book called Truths, full of lies, composed entirely of lies. And the worst lie in here of all is the steady implication that runs throughout the book, since this was written by a Vivek bro. You can expect that would be there. The fundamental lie running through this book is that Vivek Ramaswamy is his own thinker. He's not. His entire existence, everything about him, every thought, every feeling, every intention at the beginning of every day is one thing and one thing only: Donald Trump. A bald, fraud, Queen's rapist. That's it. That's all. Vivek Ramaswamy does not have any personal faith. He does not have any personal aspirations. His world is Donald Trump. What Donald Trump says is true. If Donald Trump contradicts what he says on what he said on Monday, on Tuesday, then what he said on Monday never happened, the fascists reclaiming history, and what he said on Tuesday is true. If Donald Trump contradicts himself again on Wednesday, Monday and Tuesday disappear. For Vivek Ramaswamy personally. So, sooner or later, I until these things are signed in schools, we're only 10 years at the most out from this book being assigned to your kids in school. But until then, I'm starting to draw a line. I'm pretty sure that if I return in 2025, I will simply not read any of these Trump books anymore. I felt like I had a bounden duty to do that, because this is the most important thing that's ever happened in the history of this country. And if it happens the way I think it will end up being one of the most important things that ever happens in the history of the world. And Vivek Ramaswamy is totally behind it. He wants that thing to happen. He wants everyone to live the way he does, where he gets up in the morning and the first and only thing he thinks about all day long is Donald Trump. That's it. That's all. The leader. The sun shines because of the leader. The birds chirp because of the leader. Unless the leader doesn't like that kind of bird, in which case I don't like them either and never have. And if I wrote in my diary when I was 10 that I really liked that kind of book, not only did I not write that, but I never kept a diary, and I was never 10. Not exactly a recommend. then this next one, I haven't read this yet. I'm not holding out a lot of hope for a number of different reasons. This is again Sumerian September, although I don't think this comes out in September. This is another Conan pastiche novel. This is by James Lovegrove, and it's called Conan and the Cult of the Obsidian Moon. And you can see there on the cover, it's a black stone novel. The powers that be at Titan Books have come up with this idea of the black stone as a unifying narrative MacGuffin through novels, but also comic books as well. That it exists in all eras, in all times, in all realities, and therefore it is something that is in the lives of every Robert E. Howard protagonist, all of them, not just the usual Conan and Cull and Cormac McCart and Solomon Kane, but all the others as well, the private detectives, the boxers, whatnot, the Western heroes, the gunfighters. I don't think Conan works with that kind of narrative construction. I don't think so. We'll see. I don't know that I've ever read James Lovegrove, so it might be that he can make up for. I mean, a Blackstone novel. Okay, what does that mean? Even just looking at the cover, first of all, Conan's not on the cover, but you look at that, you say, okay, Conan and the Cult of the Obsidian Moon. All right, sounds like a Conan adventure, a sword and sorcery story. But a Blackstone novel, well, What does that mean? I've never read any of the Blackstone novels. Do I need to? Are they all part of a series? It's possible that they are. It's possible that that's what's building here, and that not. It could be that James Lovegrove doesn't do a good job of explaining that, so that this will feel like the middle book in a series. So I'm going at it with trepidation, just a bit of trepidation. Then this next one is American Civil War, and an interesting take. It's by an author that I never miss, Nigel Hamilton. I think Nigel Hamilton is great, and this is his book Lincoln versus Davis, which is called The War of the Presidents because Jefferson Davis styled himself the President of the Confederacy. The Confederacy was never a legitimate country, so he was never a legitimate president. So this is not really the War of the Presidents. It's the war between the President of the United States, duly elected twice, and the chief of the insurgents, the chief rebel. Not the one who did the most damage, that would be Robert E. Lee, but the one who led the rebellion. So, the Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader would be would be the comparison in pop culture. But Nigel Hamilton in this book, I haven't read it yet, but I know that I will enjoy it. Even if I don't enjoy his premises, I know that I will enjoy it. Nigel Hamilton is one of those authors who just does not disappoint me at all. And his premise here is that this is the only time in American history so far that presidents on American soil went to war with each other. There were 2 presidents in America, and they went to war with each other. And Nigel Hamilton's idea here is that war should have been a lot more unequal than it looks. Lincoln was a country lawyer. Jefferson Davis was a soldier, had been a soldier. That is the tagline for this book. That's the publicity material. That seems on its face a little bit facile, and therefore I don't think it comes from Nigel Hamilton, because it leaves out the most important thing of all, right? I mean, you could be a rhesus monkey in charge of one of these 2 governments if you've got a million more men. if you've got an entire eastern seacoast of manufacturing warehouses, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Jefferson Davis could have been a ninja warrior. It still wouldn't have mattered. If you don't have the men and you don't have the material, you're going to lose. It doesn't matter who the commander on the other side is. Right? I mean, we can see that in World War II, right? Franklin Roosevelt had only administrative experience at any kind of warfare. And most of the people he was up against had military experience in the field. But he had a million more men, so, and an unlimited amount of material, so it didn't matter. I think the main thing I'll go into this for will be that Nigel Hamilton is absolutely terrific at personalities, at digging around and giving you personalities and giving them you fresh in ways that you've never had them before. Different angles. Really, really good stuff. And if he can do that, if you can do that for Lincoln, it will be a flat-out miracle. But if you can do it for Jefferson Davis, that's fine by me. I've read plenty of books on Jefferson Davis. I'd be happy to read another one. And then once I finish with the finished copy, off it will go to Iowa to Bill Rutenberg at the Rutenberg Library, who's going to want this book more than I am. Then this next one is by Christopher Brown. I haven't read this yet. Its premise is intriguing, but I worry. Naturally, I worry. This is called A Natural History of Empty Lots. And I don't know if you can make it out, but it has a cover blurb from Jeff Vandermeer, which is no small thing. And the subtitle is Field Notes from Urban Edgelands, Back Alleys, and Other Wild Places. And that's what it is. The author goes to sprawling, abandoned areas that are urban. So fragments of buildings, fragments of roads, unfinished developments, that sort of thing, where nature is reclaiming it. And nature is making inroads, wild animals, plants, all sorts of sometimes water, are making inroads in there. And that is fascinating. I have been endlessly fascinated with such areas all over the world my entire life. I've encountered, I don't even know how many of these kinds of areas. Edgelands is a really good word for it, where you're walking and suddenly you get to some place that isn't natural. Obviously construction took place here, but it has been abandoned by humans. I have explored in a large number of those places, which is not something that I recommend you do. If you are footloose and fancy-free, if you are out wandering, I do not recommend that you do that, because these can be really dangerous places. predators, human and otherwise, use these as ready-made traps and ready-made shelters. So there can be really, really dangerous places. I did it when I had a crowd of dogs with me. And that's proof against pretty much anything you're going to find out on the road. Unless it's a bored Russian border guard with a rifle. but this wouldn't be that. But you want to be careful with these things, is what I mean. If you're walking around in the wilderness and you're sick of triple checking the log you want to sit down on to have your lunch for rattlesnakes, you're sick of checking the sky for lightning or rain, you're sick of checking the far distance for elk or bear, and you come across a ruined office park, and you think, oh, great, fantastic. You shouldn't. You should think just the opposite. It's more dangerous, not less. So this has a personal connection to me. I find the subject fascinating. You might be wondering why I'm a little worried. Because the publicity material for this book says that the author explores how these edgelands, these ruined spaces, reflect capitalism, ambition, ecological problems, and also social problems. And the one thing I don't want to encounter in this book is Christopher Brown tracking his way into an abandoned shopping mall in Russian Georgia, or in American Georgia, tracking his way into an abandoned shopping mall, finding an overgrown shopping cart covered in dirt and flowering plants and whatnot, and digging into it a little, looking not for a hibernating bear and not for a hibernating gopher, but for racism. The one thing I don't want is for him to dig into these places and find racism. So we will see. Maybe that was just put in the description just to sell the book. I don't know at this point who that would sell the book to, but maybe so. Then we have a romance novel. This is a Regency romance novel. It really doesn't matter to me what the plot is, because I read this author. This author has never let me down. This is The Trouble with Inventing a Viscount. It's a Liars Club book by Vivian Loret, and I read everything by this author. I have like half a dozen of her books on the romance bookcase. She, to my mind, can do no wrong. If this is a misstep, I'll be amazed. But I'm going to read it anyway. It's a modern Regency, so it would be very lascivious, probably, and it will also have a lot more agency on the part of the woman than older Regencies did. Older Regencies, the woman was a bored daughter of an aristocratic family, so never had to worry about money at all, or was a governess, but astonishingly beautiful, or something like that. Whereas a lot of the women in modern Regencies have businesses of their own. It's just it's a little more of the Bridgerton TV adaptation fantasy version of the willing suspension of disbelief. You just have to accept it. And I do. And it often leads to terrific stories. Then we have something by Kevin Grange. Haven't read this yet. We'll see. This is Grizzly Confidential. And this is the story of the author walking out into the wilderness and encountering grizzly bears. And I will, so there are a lot of books on this list where, I don't know anything at all, and I will be gladly soaking up what the author has to tell me. I'm sure I know less about the workings of the fascist manipulation of history than Stanley does. I'm sure that I do. I'm sure that I know less about a lot of these subjects, but I have done this. What this author is describing here, the basis of this book, I have done this. Probably in more places than he has, probably at more times than he has, and probably for longer than he has. I've probably had more grizzly encounters than Kevin Grange has. So I'm going to be going at this. I'm not going to be going at this book with, a high on my horse, let me tell you stories when I was a kid attitude. No. But I am not going to be going to it from the supplicant viewpoint of a reader who knows nothing about the subject. I do know about the subject, and I'm a little worried about this book, again, because the publicity material, which is not the book, it's not Kevin Grange, but the publicity material tells us that Kevin Grange went out into the wilderness to meet the grizzly bear, and then gives the grizzly bear's Linnaean classification, the Latin name in parentheses to specifically identify an animal. And in the publicity material for this book, the identification is Ursus arctos, and that is not correct. That is not correct. The Linnaean classification for the grizzly bear is not 2 words; it's 3. It's Ursus arctos horribilis. You can't leave that out just because you're looking to conserve these animals. I'm looking to conserve them too. But you can't leave that word out, okay? Just to make them seem more sympathetic. That horribilis is in there for a reason, because these are homicidal maniacs with claws the size of linoleum knives. So I worry, we'll see. I don't think I've ever read Kevin Grange before. I worry just a little that what I'm going to read here is a book all about fuzzy wuzzy little moppets. I'm just wandering through a field. And if I want to belt a full-grown moose on the side of the head and crush its skull and eat it over the course of 3 days, while its calves look on in terror, and I let them because I want them nearby, because I'm going to eat them too while they're alive. All right. At this point, you may be thinking, maybe you have too much emotional freight to read this book objectively. I guess we'll see, won't we? I can be objective. I'm never going to meet one of these things again. Then this next one is by Charles King. And like Nigel Hamilton, this is an author, like Vivian Loret, this is an author who has never let me down. We got this book on this channel. We saw the advance copy, and I don't think I said that at the time. And I should always note that. This author has never let me down. That means a lot. That means your credit in the bank of Steve is going to be astonishing. It's going to take a gigantic economic crash of the type that every 4 or 8 years a Republican administration causes in this country. We keep electing them. It's very strange. They attack your rights, they dispossess your neighbors, and they ruin your economy. And we keep electing them. Because fascists rewrite history, and the promise that they always make is, hey, remember when things were sunny and great and there were never any problems at all? We'll go back to that. We'll make America that again. That time never existed. You do not, in fact, remember that. But if they can say it often enough, they can get people to believe it. Man, oh man. But anyway, the author is Charles King, and this is his book, Every Valley, which when I first unwrapped it here on this channel, I thought, oh, surely there's not enough here to make a book. This is a Smithsonian Magazine article, at most. Because it's a story of the men and women, it's a story of the people and the social elements that combined to make the backdrop against which Friedrich Handel created his oratorio Messiah. And Every Valley is one of the most famous bits from the Messiah. It's not the most famous. The Alleluia chorus is the most famous. But Every Valley is one of the most famous ones, and also infamous in music circles, if you talk to people in music circles, because there is a point in the solo part of Every Valley that's almost unsingable. It not just vocal control, but just the amount of air you have in your lungs, just how long you're supposed to keep going before you're able to draw a breath, before the score will let you draw a breath. It's amazing. It's amazing. I've tried it, and it's not. I can't do it. Not at all. I can't even come close. But I didn't think there was. I mean, the anecdotes around Handel's Messiah are well known. There are 2 or 3 of them, and they're well known. They crop up in the liner notes every time this thing is put out in a CD or whatnot. So I didn't think there was a broader story to tell here that would be of any interest or that would sustain the whole book, and I was wrong. I should have known better. This author never disappoints. I should have known better. This is terrific. I would order. Well, it's Handel in London. It's history, and that doesn't appeal to everybody as a recommendation if you're talking about how to recommend the book. But literally everybody has heard Handel's Messiah. Plenty of people have annual rituals, family rituals of going to their local or even not so local performance of Handel's Messiah. Plenty of people do that. They're familiar with the work, and that might help. That might be a little door open to somebody who's a reluctant reader of history, but who won't feel quite so put off if they read this thing. So maybe, as a recommendation, certainly those of you who aren't afraid of reading history and know the work, you're definitely going to want to read this. And then this next one is by an author that I really like, Helen Castor, but it is not an example of something you can recommend to someone who doesn't read history. This is The Eagle and the Heart, and it's the story of the lifelong rivalry and the literally nation-shaking relationship between the man who would go on to be Richard II and the man who would go on to be Henry IV. There's a little bit of I haven't read this yet, but there's a little bit of a discrepancy there because the man who would go on to become Richard II was boring. Even when he was monarch, he was boring. And Henry Bolingbroke was anything but boring ever in his life, even as a kid. so Helen Castor's going to have to work really hard to balance this out so you're not just skipping to the eagle or the heart parts, but she can do that. She's really good. So I look forward to it, and we will see. Then this next one is a counterpoint. This is the thing you do when, like me, you read new releases. You will often see subject matters duplicate. That will often happen. Not treatments of subject matters. That almost never duplicates. But subject matters. In a bookish season, random chance will have it that 2 authors, maybe 3 authors, will all write about the same thing at the same time, roughly the same time. I just recently read Stephen Budiansky's book on the Battle of Antietam, the American Civil War, A Day in September. And it was good. I enjoyed it. It wasn't anything more than good. It was an enjoyable entry-level study of both the battle and the social conditions before and after the battle. It did its remit. It did exactly what it said it was going to do. But I think I wrote in my review, certainly I must have said it on this channel, that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books on the Battle of Antietam. And some of them go into a lot more detail than Budiansky was writing a popular short book for a general audience. But also this year is coming out a book by D. Scott Hartwig called I Dread the Thought of the Place, which is also about Antietam. And it is 5 times as long as Budiansky's book. It's a minute-by-minute breakdown of the battle, but also of the broader campaign in which the battle took place. Lee's broader campaign. And I haven't read it yet, but I must say, when it comes to studies of history, I've made this point before on this channel, that although I appreciate books like Budiansky's, and I want them to be there, I want them to exist, like Every Valley, for instance. There have been very long books on Handel's life, on his creation, the creation of his most famous work, on the actual musical anatomy of the work itself. There have been very long books, very entertaining books on those subjects. I don't think I've ever read one in English, but there have been books like that. King's book is not that. It's meant to be a sliver of that will introduce the subject to a general interest reading public that really is maybe a little put off, a little bored, or a little intimidated by history. Same thing with the Budiansky book. As a treatment of the Battle of Antietam set in a broader setting before and after, very carefully shaped around individual lives, it's just fine and will probably work magic on a lot of readers who might not have thought of themselves as readers of history. This is not that. And I've made it clear on this channel that I prefer this. This is for someone who is not a beginner at reading history, and I am not a beginner at reading history. So I am bound to enjoy this more, even though the irony of the reviewing trade is that although I will enjoy this more, the more detail it goes into, this is like 1,000 pages long, the less recommendable it will be to most other people. It's very rare that I get to recommend a 1,000-page book. That almost never happens. Every once in a while, somebody will manage a general interest book that is 1,000 pages long, and then I cheer it from the rooftops. But I doubt this will be one of those cases. I think this will be down to regiments. Then this next one is by Dallas Willard. I don't know how many of you read Christian writings. I probably a lot of you don't, but he had a very popular book in those circles. I think it was last year or the year before, and he's come out with a new book called The Scandal of the Kingdom. And this is, at heart, a study of the parables of Jesus. It'll go on beyond that because he's a preacher, and he will preach in this book. But it's a study of those parables, and from what I gather, I haven't read it yet, but from what I gather, it's a study of the way those parables reshape the faithful's idea of the kingdom of heaven. And that is true. They do. The parables do that. The parables are actually explosive. They're so familiar to us that we don't think about them that way, but they are explosive. The good ones. There are plenty of bad ones. There are plenty of them that don't make any sense at all. But the really good ones, the justly famous ones, are explosive in their subversive power. If you are faithful, if you are a believing Christian, they are explosive. Because they destroy forever. They wipe away the idea of delayed accountability. They underscore the fact that as a Christian, you are immediately accountable. And why? Because the kingdom of heaven, behold, is suddenly upon you. Jesus makes it clear in his preaching, but also in the parables, that the kingdom of heaven is not where you're going. It's where you are now. The most famous of all Jesus' parables is the parable of the prodigal son. Well, the prodigal son is in a foreign land. He is starving to death when suddenly he comes to his senses and realizes that at my father's house, even the servants have plenty to eat. I have sinned against my father. I will go back and beg to be one of his servants. I will not go back expecting anything. I will go back and beg to be one of his servants. And he does, and his father sees him coming and welcomes him with open arms, a feast. If you read that parable in Christian terms, it's easy to understand that the father in the parable is God the Father. And if that's true, and I've never known anyone who read that parable otherwise, it's incredibly important to remember that the prodigal son does not die. He doesn't go to a mystical other realm. He enters his father's kingdom now. He does it now. The kingdom of heaven is now. It is here. It has happened. It is happening. That is the what I believe is embodied in Jesus' parables. So I will see what Dallas Willard has to say about that. I imagine that it will get a little thin for me when it comes to the preaching bits, and I don't know how far he'll take it. I think if I remember correctly, he's a fundamentalist preacher, which means he certainly won't take it as far as his own Messiah does. His Lord takes it all the way to the end, the final justification of it. He takes it all the way to the end. Whenever you have done these things for the least of my brethren, you've done it to me. Meaning, if you didn't do it to them, you denied it to me. Me, personally. I was the one standing there. That little kid who doesn't get a hot meal in the course of a day. If you, a fundamentalist preacher, or a Republican fundamentalist, deny him his lunch at school. If you write legislation that denies him that, you are keeping Jesus hungry. That is the reading of that I've seen Christians do for whenever you do it to the least of my brethren, you do it to me. Of course, when we read the Gospels, as we've done on this channel, it is easy to see that Jesus is not saying that. He's not talking metaphorically. He's saying, when you do it to the least of my brethren, meaning these guys that I'm sending out to preach in my name. Not everyone in the world, just these guys. But nevertheless, the way Christians have interpreted that is a good interpretation. And I don't think that Dallas Willard does that. I'd be willing to bet that he doesn't. But I don't know much about him, so we will see. I'll read the book anyway to see if he has anything interesting to say about the parables of Jesus, which is fascinating. I've read probably 100 books on that subject alone. Okay, all right, this next one, I'm going a bit long here, sorry. This next one, I hold out no hope for. The author is a moron and a charlatan. So the chances of there being anything interesting in his new book, I know, we've dealt with a number of people who are morons and charlatans here, but this is not Vivek Ramaswamy. This is Malcolm Gladwell, who is not only not considered, broadly speaking, a moron and a charlatan, but also considered a wise man and something of a futurist oracle. Nothing could be further from the truth. But he has a new book. You will know him most often from his book, The Tipping Point. And he is writing The Revenge of the Tipping Point, which is yet more TED Talk, billiard ball, stoner intellectual at the end of the dormitory hall. Hey, did you realize? Stuff. None of which is true. None of which makes sense at all. This is just Freakonomics all over again. This is where he's going to make a claim. He's going to shore it up with a whole bunch of graphs, pictures. I am a thought leader. He's going to shore it up with nothing at all. This is not a book. I know I say that a lot in 2024, but 2024 has really been the advent of the non-book. This is not a book. This is an audition. This is an audition script for Joe Rogan. and every other intellectual dark web place where this guy is going to go to talk about, hey, did you know that sidewalks cause the bubonic plague? Hey, did you know that sunspots actually make the minimum wage? Hey, did you know that every giraffe is actually a jazz impresario? Let me explain why. If you are out there, if you're listening to this channel, probably this doesn't apply to you, but if you are out there and you think this guy is somehow uniquely insightful into the nature of reality and how we think and society, up your standards. He's a moron. And he's going to sell an absolute boatload of this book. People who think he's a profound thinker. Just amazes me. Okay. All right. Well, we'll end on a happy note, I promise. But this next one is not any better. This is also someone who is largely a fraud. This is Ta-Nehisi Coates, and this is his new book, The Message. I have not read this yet, but I already know its premise. And when you strip away the padding and the wording, the rhetoric that publicists use for this, the message is my truth. The heart of this book is the concept of my truth, which is, of course, false. I know people say that all the time. Twitter addicts get up at their city council meetings, take the podium and say, well, my truth on this subject. No, no. That is nonsense. You do not have a truth on the subject. It's something that you say is either right or wrong. You might have beliefs on the subject, but your beliefs are not, by that definition, true. And that is what this is going to be. This is Ta-Nehisi Coates saying, I hadn't even realized how much power our words have to alter the very nature of reality. I don't know if you're called Ta or Nehisi, Terry. You don't. Your words don't have the power to alter reality at all. So you don't have to worry about how much they do. They don't at all have that power to do it. But this is going to be him going from one situation to another saying, well, the way I see this has now become the way it is because I see it that way and I say it that way. He's a fluid writer. This probably won't be an unbearable experience to read, but it's going to be infuriating. It's going to be infuriating. It's going to be Twitter politics raised to book level. It's going to be, if I say something's true, it's my truth, and therefore you're attacking my ancestors going back to the Stone Age if you contradict it. When you don't have a truth, you have your opinions. If what you say is true, well, then you should be able to prove it. The fact that you believe it, it does not make it true. But anyway, I promised we would end on a happy note, and we will, because I did a reread just the other day. I went back to my beloved Washington Irving. I love him so much. He was a very, very early American writer. His work, he is largely forgotten now, except for just a couple of fables that he told. The Headless Horseman or Rip Van Winkle. But he's really good. All the stuff that he wrote is really good. He was really, really successful at writing. The first person really on this continent to be successful at writing. Financially successful, I mean. And every once in a while I go back and just read. I have everything of his. Everything of his is available on Project Gutenberg. All of it is. And I every once in a while I go back and read something just because he's so enjoyable to me to read. He's just so enjoyable, even more so than my beloved James Fenimore Cooper. And so I went back and reread his short story, Little Britain, which is not Vicky Pollard. I should point out, it is not the only gay in the village. It is not the great show, Little Britain. It is a little story that he wrote. He lived in England for a time and wrote a story about his neighborhood and the people in it and their foibles and the things that they do from minute to minute and day to day. And it's just delightful. Just absolutely delightful. I loved it. I loved it. I may add a little Washington Irving to my reading tonight as well, depending on how bad the day gets. But anyway, that is my, sorry, oh my God, sorry for the time. I apologize for the length of the video, but I don't apologize quite entirely because this may be the only video I make today. It's just possible. I am smoothing out the bumps in the carpet of a new job. I know I didn't put on pants. I'm still right here where you see me every day, but I do have a new job. It looks like it might be a little bigger than I thought it would be. And in the beginning stages, it's always complicated. You've got to paper train a new editor. In this case, there's both an editor and the client, which I don't usually accept. I don't usually deal with that, but that is also present. That is causing little bumps and hiccups and whatnot. And there's also an actual editor, a real newspaper editor, sent me something to review. So it's possible that this will be the only video today. So the important thing for you to remember here, all of you who send me emails when I make 3 videos a day asking if I've somehow died, because you're just a little bit spoiled, the important thing to remember here is not Steve is only making 1 video today. Instead, it's important to remember that all those other BookTube channels that I like make 3 videos a week, 1 video a week, 1 video a month. Those channels don't make 5 videos a day. So if I make 1 video in a day, I'm not actually depriving you of anything. We will go back to the bombardment of videos, I hope, tomorrow. But this is going to be the next few days are going to be a little unsettled, where I teach people, the basics of how we're dealing with each other. What's acceptable and what's not. What are you looking for, and how do you want it set up? What kind of installments do you want? What do you like and not like in terms of style or wording? All that kind of stuff. That takes a constant back and forth of emails, even the dreaded video conferences. So that might cut down on videos. So anyway, and for those of you who might be muttering to yourself, well, we'd get 5 videos if this video had been shorter. This is a Friday Reads. And as a Friday Reads, which looks at what I have read in the last week, what I'm currently reading, and what I intend to read in the next week, this is an extremely abbreviated version of that video. So I can't win for losing with you people. I can't take you anywhere. Anyway, that's a Friday Reads for now. Of course, when it comes to Friday Reads, I want to know what your story is. What are you reading? What are you working on? What have you really enjoyed? I've asked this before, but we're getting closer and closer to December. How is 2024 shaping up for you as a reading year? Are you enjoying your reading? Have you had a really standout reading experience recently? Tell me all. In the comments, in emails, tell me all. Of course, if you send me an email on the subject, you can write as long as you want. If you want to write a 5,000-word journal entry, basically, about what you've done in the last week, feel free. But don't expect a response to something that long. I'm happy to read it, but it's unlikely that I will respond to something that's enormously long. And B, if you're writing me a quick bullet-pointed email about what you've read this week and what you thought about it, there should be something else with that email, yes? Yes, pictures of your dogs. And if you say, well, I have cats, not dogs, I'll accept that. And if you say, well, I have neither cats nor dogs, you have tech. You could send me pictures of your tech. You have something. I'm a lonely, frail old shut-in. I want contact with the outside world. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up before it goes all the way to an hour. But I will see you soon. Anyway, it won't be today, I don't think. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.